Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Bryony and I'm one half of Indecisive Readers. Before I start this video, I would like to point out that there is a lot of stuff going on in America in regards to race and riots, and it's important to address. If you are like me and are in the UK and you feel a bit powerless, I'm going to link in my description a website that has a link to a lot of petitions and places you can donate, so you can at least sign those, because like me, sometimes that feels like the only thing you can do. But yeah, I just wanted to address that before I start this video, because I will be continuing posting my content as usual and I don't want to seem insensitive by not mentioning it. Today's video is a spoiler-filled review for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. I have taken the dust jacket off because I don't like dust jackets, and you've got stuff on the cover so you know what it is. If you don't know what this is about, this is the prequel to the Hunger Games books, which is a book focusing on a tournament where 24 tributes are sent into an arena every year, chosen from the 12 districts in the capital, and they have to fight to the death of one remaining victor. This, as it is the prequel, is set 64 years before the original book, and it is set in the 10th games, and it focuses on the antagonist of the Hunger Games trilogy, and that is President Snow, but being President Snow. I was super excited to read this. This was on my anticipated books of the year, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I did rate it 3 stars, and I don't know if I'm sad about that. It's just a thing that happens. Sometimes you don't like books. I didn't not like it, but I just didn't love it. So I have got some notes here. They are not very comprehensive because I just rushed through them now. I finished it on Saturday night, I think, and kind of, yeah, had to think about everything for a day, had to gather my thoughts for a little bit before I actually wrote down what I thought, came up with a rating, because I was really torn about the rating, because ratings are very much influenced, at least for me, by the people around me, and people were either rating it 1 star or 4 stars. I wasn't seeing anything in the middle, and I felt very middle about it. I just wasn't particularly blown away by it. I'm going to see if I can put my book down, but put it down in a way that you can still see. You see it? You can go and see it. The book's there. First things first, I rated it 3 stars. Thought it was okay. I'm gonna kind of go through my pros and cons, but the main thing I want to say was it was interesting. I don't really have any other words to describe it, but you know when you're like, this was interesting, but not like interesting in a way where it's bad, but like it genuinely was interesting because it very much builds the world that we've all known for like 10 years or something. Like, I probably discovered this in 2012 when the first movie came out, but yeah, interesting is the word I would choose to describe this series. So the first thing I've written is I feel conflicted about this because I have already read the Hunger Games trilogy. There were things I liked about it and things I didn't like about it because I'd already read those books. So the first things first is Snow is obviously the antagonist in the Hunger Games books, and as a good thing, we don't necessarily sympathise with him in this. He isn't likeable. He's a bit cunning, a bit scheming, and you don't quite trust everything he's saying, because in the first like 2/3 of the book, he is working to get this scholarship, this prize to go to university, because his family don't have a lot of money, and so he has to work really hard to get this scholarship because it's the only way he's going to get to university, and then by going to university he's going to like rise up in the ranks and become president one day. And so whilst he's doing it with good intentions because he's meant to be saving this girl that he vaguely maybe loves, he is also doing it for himself. so you never quite trust his intentions, and that becomes really, really prominent in the third, where he goes to District 12 and he's working as a peacekeeper, and again it's kind of his secretive way to like rise back up the ranks because he's been kicked out of school and that's the only way he can think of doing it. But in the third, he's a lot more typically Snow. We can see him making decisions to save himself at the cost of others. Like, he sends this recording via Jabberjay, which was a really clever move, I'll admit, and gives up his best friend for, or his best friend sort of thing, to the capital, and they kill him, and he's like, never mind, shouldn't have done that, but he's a bad person. But then also, because he's Snow, he's a slimy person, and then there's a romance, and the romance is like a massive part for the last third, and it just feels so uncomfortable because you know he's this slimy, skeezy person, and yet he is meant to be lovable, and he's really not. But then in the last couple of chapters, you saw that his romance was still for his benefit. Lucy Gray was like quite genuine, but it was almost probably like a bit like a Stockholm syndrome, where she'd fallen in love with her captor because he was being nice to her, and he's just very scheming, and he's doing it on purpose, and yeah, just the romance was weird, and therefore I didn't like it because I knew what Snow was like already. But on the other hand, because I'd read the Hunger Games books, I really liked the games in it, and this is because I know what the games are like for the 74th and the 75th games, but the 10th games are something new altogether. So the games in this are like completely different. So there's no arena purposefully built, there are no mutts, or no mutts before this game, the mutts are introduced to this game. Mentors aren't involved, betting and gambling and sending the tributes. Sponsor gifts is new for this games, and so seeing that development is really interesting. And then in the epilogue, Snow goes to the academy specifically to like learn and do this, and yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and I think had I not read the Hunger Games first, I wouldn't be able to appreciate that. Likewise with the songs are a massive part in this book, and Lucy Gray is a singer and she writes lots of songs, and she writes a lot of songs that we recognise. So she writes the Hanging Tree and she writes the Meadow Song, and so seeing the story behind those is really interesting, and seeing how they came into being, because for us it's just kind of they exist, we know the songs, but we don't know the story behind the songs. I didn't like how the narrator, because I listened to the audiobook, I didn't like how he didn't sing the songs, because it would have added to it, would have made it a bit more immersive, but it's fine. I didn't like how Snow like had to analyse every song though, but that's fine. Oh, I'm going to mention it now because I put it in the spoiler for you, because it's not really non-spoilery, it's not particularly spoilery, but when I saw the title, which I initially hated, it's too wordy, it's that kind of generic YA title, but it makes a lot of sense having read the book. So obviously ballads are a big part because Lucy Gray is a songwriter and therefore she's the songbird, but also the Jabberjays and the Mockingjays actually form a bigger part of the narrative than I thought they would. And the snakes, I assumed the songbird would be Lucy, which he is, and I assumed the snake would be Snow, which again he is. But snakes are also a big part. There's the snake that Lucy chucks down the girl's shirt very early in the book. And there's also the snakes that are in the arena, like the first mutts that are introduced to the games. And I just thought of that last night and thought it was really interesting and adds a lot more meaning to the book and the title. Another thing I liked and hated was the ending. This is why I rated it 3 stars, because for everything I liked, there was something I hated or disliked, but the ending was really rushed, which was on purpose. So the ending was kind of really confused, and that was the point of it. The 10th Hunger Games are basically wiped from history at the end of this, and so that's really interesting, leaving it confusing, and also interesting that it was considered such a mistake that they were just like, nope, let's pretend it didn't happen. And yet in District 12 they do remember that there was another victor before Hamish, but they just don't remember anything about her. So I think it's interesting the fact that 64 years later they still know that there was a victor. But I've got no idea what happened to Lucy Gray, and I know that's the point, but it was really, really frustrating because I read it and I was like, hang on, what happened? And I had to go back and read it, and I don't think it helped that I was reading it late at night, but I was really confused and just didn't like it. However, despite the ending being really rushed, the rest of the book wasn't. Like, I'm just going to pick it up for the sake of showing you, but it's not an insubstantial book. It's a really big, chunky book. The writing's not huge, and it's 520 pages long, give or take, and not a lot happens in it. It's a very slow book. It took me a while to want to pick it up, and then in the end, it may have been not helped by the fact I wanted to finish it before the end of the month, but in the end I was reading it because I felt like I had to, rather than because I wanted to. I mean, there was a part in the middle where I was like, oh, this is really interesting, I want to keep reading, but that was the bits based in the games, and that bit wasn't long. The pre-games and the end games were very long and drawn out, on purpose, because they needed to set up a world that we already knew and justify a world that we already knew, but it was slow, and I can see why a lot of people DNF'd it at the start, because that first 150, 200 pages, nothing happened, or a lot happened, but yeah, so many things happened, like all those tributes and all the mentors died before the start of the games, and the games were being set up and they were made to write all these essays, and so a lot of stuff was happening, but just stuff that didn't keep my attention. So by the time I was on the third part, whilst it wasn't like particularly exciting, I was just like, oh, carry on reading. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters in this, obviously apart from Snow, because Snow's a scumbag. He was interesting to read about. He was interesting to read about us thinking he's a scumbag, seeing his relations with people, seeing how scheming he is again interesting. But I really like Sejanus, who is one of like Snow's closest friends, but he thinks he's Snow's closest friend, but Snow thinks he's just a bit annoying. He's from the districts but has lived in the capital for most of his life, but still feels like a loyalty to the capital. And so I think his character was interesting because it added a new point of view to the story. Obviously if we just had Snow, he would have just been hating the districts, although obviously he's not meant to, because he's also meant to love Lucy, but I think his love was just like really calculated. Lucy again is quite interesting because she's not completely district, she's a bit different. She's from this covey who have moved around and have been forced to stay in District 12. But also I feel like I don't know anything about Lucy Gray. I don't know how old she is, I don't know what she looked like. She just existed as like this being, this kind of vessel for Snow to direct all his desires through. But she just existed as a blank person, which I think is such a shame because she's really interesting. Unless I, of course, missed the descriptions of her, which is completely possible because I just don't read descriptions. But nothing about her is standing out. Whereas I know that Snow had curly hair, and yeah. There was a lot of like reverse foreshadowing, so things that we knew about were hinted at in this, so like funny, well not funny things, but things that were ironically funny to us as a future reader. I don't know how to word it, but like things like Snow absolutely hating the Mockingjay and not particularly liking the songs, and there were various lines about fire is catching and the rebellion, and it was interesting. But I don't really know what to say other than that. But yeah, I would reread it. I would annotate it, like I said, point out all the reverse foreshadowing. Read it when I'm less on a time limit, because I think that did limit my enjoyment. But I also think having reread the books recently helped me understand the world, but also made me more disappointed in this because I love the original one so much and it just didn't quite live up to it, which isn't a problem. Sometimes books don't, like books in the series don't always live up to the first one, and then sometimes they're better, but just fact of life, putting it in my review. So there. If you have also read and enjoyed or read and hated this book, please let me know in the comments, message me on Twitter or Instagram and just talk about it with me. I will also be posting a non-spoiler review. I will have posted a reading blog by now, hopefully, and I'll probably post a review on the blog and on Goodreads because a lot of people want to hear opinions on it before they go and buy the book, and therefore I might as well share my opinion far and wide whilst I can. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing if you're not already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!